Now, last night we heard that Australia got 10th on the Olympic medal tally, and there was outrage. Today we heard Glenys talk about the fact the Global Innovation Index, we were 19th. We heard collaboration-wise, we were either 24th or 28th. No outrage. We heard Andrew and Geoff talk about the importance of collaboration between the universities and the research establishments. How do we take the best examples that you've just shown us, and I certainly, when I see companies that are top performers, they collaborate with universities, they collaborate with Data 61, they collaborate with CSIRO, but it is not prevalent. How do we make that the norm, and how do we get the outrage in the Australian community that we're not 10th on all of those indexes?
Who wants to take that?
Well, you know, on the Olympics, right, what interests me is the fact that we expect a better result. We've got like 1/6 of the population of the UK, and we put in half of the funding that they put into sport. So what kind of result do we expect, right? You get what you invest in. And I think there's a relationship between that result and what we're talking about here. We're a sports-mad country. We've got to be a science-mad country as well. We've got to put as much effort into developing interest in science and technology amongst our kids and building that culture from the ground up as we do in relation to sport. It's ridiculous that we have been a top 5 nation at the Olympic Games in the past, given our population and the fact that we're so isolated. We have punched well and truly above our weight. And it's because we put such a priority and emphasis on it as a country. It was the number one thing. I go down past my local oval in the morning, and there are 6-year-old kids getting one-on-one personal training in soccer, right? I'm thinking, man, you'd be much better at home having a one-on-one tutor in math, right? Because that's going to drive wealth and prosperity for Australia. And the chances of you playing for Manchester United are about 0. So that's my view on that one.
And said for somebody who has just come back from the Olympics as well. Other questions?
Great conversation. Mary-Anne D. Gelinardo, Director of Corporate Services at Maroondah City Council. Smell of an oily rag, local government, third on the food chain, nothing like the size of companies you guys are leading at the moment. I guess from a fundamental perspective, it's what's the opportunity to free up resources from existing business as usual. We've heard about leadership, we've heard about culture, we've heard about partnering with people that are currently our stakeholders, including our client group. If you gave us some tips, you all live in a local government somewhere, what would be the thing that you think local government should be focusing on to become leaders in the innovation space?
Thanks for the question. I guess I might be a bit biased having had that as a previous portfolio, but you look at 73 or thereabouts of local councils across Australia. I think there's great opportunities to consolidate things like procurement, back-end services and the like, if you're talking about freeing up resources to focus on those things that provide a greater return to councils. So I think councils need to probably get out of the competitive spirit with each other and look at more better coordination around procurement and management for the broader community. And I think in the public service we're faced with the same things about freeing up resources so you can focus on the important long-term things rather than putting out the bushfires of the day. So I think there's a great opportunity for local governments to take the initiative themselves in doing that.
And there's a question over here.
Beth Webster, Swinburne University. Most people are aware of the globalisation of production systems around the world. We also know that innovation and export are fairly closely linked. So this growth, especially in parts and components, is a real opportunity for Australia because we don't have to produce the whole car now. We can just produce the nut and the bolt and the part goes inside. What sort of advice would you give, because you're all actually fairly international companies, what advice would you give to a medium-sized firm who's trying to break into that global production system. And maybe Glenys could comment on, has the government got a role?
Well, my advice to any Australian company that wants to, is developing a new product and wants to innovate, is think of the market as a market of 7 billion people, not a market of 25 million people. I think too often companies in Australia are only thinking about the Australian market when they develop their business plan and when they develop their product. In fact, I think it's even worse than that. I think people think of the market of as Melbourne, or they think of the market as Sydney. We actually this year did an acquisition of a Melbourne-based company that does building automation systems. They have around about 50 software engineers sitting out in Scoresby in the old Caribbean Gardens facility. I grew up in Ringwood, so I used to hang out at Caribbean Gardens, and there wasn't a lot of innovation going on back there, I can tell you. And this company has never sold one product inside Australia. They have, from day one, they have focused on selling to Fortune 500 companies in the US. And that, I think, doesn't happen enough. I think we've got to have a global mindset, and we've got to be thinking about the market of 7 billion, not the market of 25 million people.
In terms of, we talked up front about ecosystems, just building on that, is there an opportunity for mid-sized companies and large organisations, particularly like your own, to be able to collaborate more effectively to tackle that global market?
Well, let me talk about it, because one of the things, we're clearly a domestic firm. We keep using the word collaboration, which is an interesting word, but we do form business partnerships with small innovative companies to assemble capabilities and competencies to bring to market. We do it all the time. We have to innovate around that service space, and there's so much change that's happening in the energy space. And the reason that it's happening and why there's a lot of innovation with a capital I or a small I is because we have two things that are very unique in this market when it comes to energy retailing. One is we have some of the most competitive markets in the world, and second, we have high energy prices. And so there's an absolute strategic need to innovate, to deliver more value, or to reconceptualize the market so that we can continue to attract and retain customers. A lot of that we do with small, mid-size, technology-oriented companies in Australia. Now, when I first arrived here and people started talking about innovation, I said, this is a small market. I said, why would you ever see it here? Well, the fact of the matter is, it's for the reasons I said. And the natural question then is, and I think Andrew talked to it, it's around innovation also not in the technology perspective, but in the business model perspective, which is exportable. There are markets just like Australia all over the world that are not seeing the same level of competition, so innovation can naturally happen here first. Business relationships, collaboration, business relationships can be formed here which are exportable. And so there's a great opportunity for small, innovative companies to align with larger companies that have the resources that can prove out not just technology, but the more important element, which is the commercial side of that, developing the new business models, which then literally can be exported, and exported at relatively low risk, because it is IP-based, it is the new business models, and North America and Europe, at least in my space, is following shortly after places where Australia's been. So I do think there's a great opportunity, and I do think it is about those alliances, those business relationships, and being innovative with the idea that, as Geoff said, you are thinking about proving out business models and then taking that show on the road, so to speak.
Now, there's a question over this corner.
Thank you very much. Jason Downs from Hudson Recruitment. When I think about jobs, innovation is really of interest to me because I think the two tie together nicely. The first question I've got is for Glenys in relation to government, and I'll just touch quickly on the internet speeds in Australia. We've got a big challenge with the size of our country and putting that sort of infrastructure in place. But if we don't do that well, personally I believe that that's going to be a big inhibitor to how we can innovate and what we can do, and I just wondered what your comment might be on that. And just touching on the collaboration piece that Andy was talking about there, just big business, so we've got some great representatives from big business. Open data sources lead potentially to innovation, and the opposite of that around IP and commercialisation can inhibit innovation. And I just wondered if anyone wanted to talk about open data and what open data you might be able to share across it. Thank you.
So you want to start on the internet side, and then we'll open up
So I'm not too sure what you want me to comment on, but in a sense we've been running policy hacks and those sorts of things to solve public policy problems, but are you talking about using the internet more as an information provider for business and the like, or?
I suppose as a citizen, let alone a business rep, as a citizen, I'm really worried that if we don't get the internet piece right, there's going to be all sorts of issues. But today's topic is around innovation, and again, if we don't get it right, it's going to be very difficult to innovate in a lot of ways where technology is driving innovation.
Yeah. Within government, we've got the Digital Transformation Office looking at one portal for a citizen, and similarly one portal for a business, and that's accessing government information and services. I think more broadly, when we look at the work that Data 61, for example, is doing with Treasury around blockchain and what does the Internet of Things mean for us, what's the Manufacturing 4.0 task force doing in terms of manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. So there's a number of areas where we're looking at as a portfolio. What does it mean for small, medium enterprises? Are they ready to embrace technology and look at the opportunities that technology disruption and other innovations bring? So we are absolutely working with the Digital Transformation Office in trying to do that, putting more policy problems out there to be solved by SMEs as well, in terms of some of the challenges we've put out more recently too. So I think there's a lot of work happening on that space. In terms of big data, I think that's one area in terms of where there is market failure, that there's a role for government opening up all its data sets and information, for example. And for example, on the work that we're doing with Geoscience Australia, what does the pre-competitive work look like for the whole of the continent and for the blue economy, for example? What are we doing around national positioning infrastructure to allow driverless vehicles? So there is a lot of work, and I think a lot of innovation will come from government opening up access to data and information to business.
There were two controversial statements in there. You made comment about open data and that there is not a functioning market. Does anybody, gentlemen, any of you want to comment on that, particularly in terms of some of the innovations coming down the line?
Well, the only thing I'd say is that we're in the process of trying to develop what we think will become, or we hope will become, the operating system for the industrial internet. So you've got iOS and Android on your phone, and now you build applications on top of that. And we're building a system that we hope will become the equivalent for the industrial internet. We call it Predix. And we've made it open source. You can go online, you can get onto Predix, you can start developing applications on it this afternoon if you want. Now, we could have developed that system for ourselves and used it on our own equipment and tried to drive it as a competitive advantage for that, but we've got bigger ambitions for this thing, right? It would be like Google inventing the internet and only having it for themselves internally, right? So our view on open data is that there are some things that absolutely you want to be making open source. You want to give people the opportunity to come in and work with you on it. There are some things where the IP is so important and so critical that you're going to want to keep that to yourself. But there's no set answer for every circumstance.
Yeah, the only point I'd make on the data front is that, to the degree possible, data should be available for people to develop insights on. And it's those insights which then become proprietary. So up until the point, whatever the policy settings are or the business position is, data should be open. It should be an open source. And very creative people, and this is a big innovation thing, should be developing those insights that will have great commercial value. But I think the view is that wherever data is, it should be made available to as many people as possible. And the limits on that will be whether something, either government policy settings or personal business competitive advantage. But the view is that in a data-driven world, data is the currency that's going to drive the economy, and it should be available to everybody. So I think to the degree possible, that should be the structure.
People are going to have to get their head around just the movement of data to the cloud. And you see this in every time you get a new step change in technology. I was around when email was invented, and back then I was working in a law firm, and we were only allowed to use it internally because people were worried about the risk of sending an email out to the external market, right? So that lasted for about 2 years, and then everyone got their head around the fact that people would be responsible and use it properly. And now we look back at that notion and think it was insane. So, this is the thing. How quickly can you adapt? How quickly can you get your head around the risk? How quickly can you develop the right protocols and policies to manage that risk? But the fact is, the use of data, the prevalence of data is only becoming more and more, and you're going to have to develop policies and structures to be able to manage that, otherwise you're going to get left behind.
Got time for one last quick question.
Thanks very much. We've got 3 windows on the energy industry up there, which is great, and I'm interested in 2 aspects of innovation in the energy industry. One is the proposal for gas hubs, what you guys make of that. I know we're still trying to figure it out. And in relation to the national electricity market, where we have one player in AGL and suppliers of equipment in GE, there's a lot of talk about innovation in being required in the national electricity market to catch up with all the sorts of things that technology can do and consumers want to do. But I have also heard that the computing power to drive all that and make it make sense doesn't exist. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on innovation in the NEM as well. Thanks.
Now we're almost out of time, so perhaps time for a quick answer, maybe starting Andrew.
So look, I'll just answer the first question around transparency in the gas markets. So there's government's done some great work looking at reforms in the gas industry. We fully support them. Getting additional transparency into the gas market will help both suppliers and users develop better understandings of what's going on, and we're supportive of that. We look forward to those reforms getting through both federally and through the state governments who have got to help make it work.
Andy?
Let me just start that I support the trading hubs. Congratulations to COAG for getting that agreement. Great stuff. On the NEM, National Energy Market, I think the policy reform isn't, in my mind, innovation. I mean, there are plenty of examples where markets work. The key here has to be to have clear policy settings and have markets that respond to them. A lot of different views on that, but energy markets require certain products if they're going to be working competitively. Markets have to deliver those to keep the lights on. I think the innovation which is going to come, which is actually going to be challenging market design, is as we legitimately bring consumers into the market. The 1,000 battery virtual power plant that AGL announced in Adelaide is an example of having people who are making investments in their homes in rooftop solars and batteries being a participant in the market and setting those rules right, making that work to the benefit of all. That will require some level of innovation because that is literally new. The challenges that the NEM has is that they designed a market when there was a dominant technology and you had a lot of plants around and all they had to do was be efficient in delivering energy. The fact that you are now trying to achieve climate objectives and seeing a lot of intermittent sources require a change in the market to keep it working effectively, but there are plenty of examples of how to make that work. That's much more about policy and market design. One can call it innovation, that's fine, but that's not a big step. The step when we start to include the way we make investments in a consumer's home and how that individual is a participant in and a benefactor of and a beneficiary of their investment, that's going to change some new thinking. And that future is coming. I mean, we already see around the world peer-to-peer trading, blockchain settlement using cryptocurrency. It's happening. So the question is, that's where you'll have to see innovation, and those concepts are not yet being even discussed in this market, but they probably will within the next 5 years.
And Geoff, just quickly?
Well, the biggest challenge for government is just to make sure that policy keeps up with innovation, which is extremely hard because the pace of change is going to always move more rapidly than the government can react to it. The tax code was written before the internet was invented, and that's a really sort of very clear example. The pace of change we're seeing in the energy market means that what's happening in the market, what consumers are demanding, is moving faster than the policies that regulate it, and that you have to get that alignment between policies and what's actually happening in the market to ensure you get the greatest efficiencies. So,
Andrew Smith, Glenys Beauchamp, Andy Vesey and Geoff Culbert, thank you very much, and please welcome Julian to the stage.